Having worked in a high-risk manufacturing environment myself, I'm all too familiar with the potential for catastrophic injuries and potentially even death. There's countless amount of health and safety propaganda around workplaces, but the reality of it is, when the supervisor isn't there, how much of it is actually being adhered to? You're told never work under a suspended load on the crane in case it falls, but on night shift you might say, it's never fallen before, it's not going to fall now, so stick an arm under to remove a bolt or something. Suddenly, this is the one time the crane does malfunction. Before you know it, you've lost an arm and have bled out to death on the floor. Negligence can lead to death. There should always be barriers in place that ensure this type of stuff can never happen. I remember it via this simple annotation. ERPSP. Eliminate, reduce, prevent, safe systems of work, PPE. Eliminate the risk completely. Does the work really have to be done? If not, then don't do it. Simple. Reduce. Okay, it has to happen. Let's reduce the consequence if an accident does happen. Measures like a safety harness or guardrails so that if someone does happen to fall, the repercussions aren't as severe. Prevent. Ensure that the hazard is very much out the way of everything so that no one can come into contact with it, such as barbed wire or a crazy high fuck-off electric fence with enough signs that would scare the living shit out of anyone. Safe systems of work, ensuring that the systems of how to work and the scope are drilled into employees so that they know exactly what to do and how to do it safely. And lastly, PPE. PPE is the last line of defence in an accident. Your hard hat, your steel toe cap boots, safety glasses, etc. It really is the last line of defence if everything else previously mentioned fails and goes Pete-tong. For example, if something was dropped above and your hard hat saves your bacon, or if a projectile flies out from a machine and deflects off your safety specs instead of your nice soft eyeball, which would have exploded into too many pieces of mush to even count. Health and safety comes from above, from management. The phrase goes, you can delegate responsibility, but not accountability. The manager could tell you to go do a job, the job be unsafe by say, not having a guard on the machine, you fall in and are killed. The manager ultimately is accountable, but the responsibility to do the job was yours. Make sense? Managers need to make sure that barriers are in place and employees are properly trained to avoid any risk. Unfortunately, however, this isn't always the case, and workplace accidents do sometimes happen. Norman Butler was a 60-year-old man. He was a father to 3 and a grandfather to 6. He had just started a new job at Recycle Cymru in around October 2017, located in Kimmel Bay in northeast Wales. His job here was to collect cardboard waste then deliver it to RCL, which is the abbreviation from the previously mentioned company. He was told to go above and beyond for his job, however, and put into bales at RCL as well as delivering the cardboard. The making of the cardboard into these bales was assisted by a machine called a hopper. Essentially, cardboard waste is placed at the bottom of the chute, as seen here, conveyed up the chute, then down into the hopper to be compressed into a bale. Inside this hopper, there is a hydraulic ram to crush and compact the cardboard with a force of 65 tons. Let's say the average car is just under a ton, but we'll round it up to say a ton for argument's sake. So the force of 65 cars all on top of each other acting on this cardboard at once. It's a fuck ton of pressure. So this was Norman's job, picking up cardboard and making them into recycled bales of cardboard. This hopper machine, however, it didn't like to work as it was intended to work, and cardboard would get stuck around the top of the hopper. Here is a representation of the hopper that Norman was working on in the surrounding area. If you've got an eagle eye, you'll notice there's some ropes hanging from the rafters. Now, these ropes were there for a reason. When the hopper gets clogged, employees would hold onto them and jump and kick the clogged cardboard into the hopper, which contains a 65-ton hydraulic ram, as I've mentioned. So you would do the maths. You can imagine there's a 65-ton ram under there and you're sitting stomping on the cardboard trying to make it go in. Imagine you were to slip. It doesn't sound all too safe, does it? Going back to what we discussed earlier with ERPSP, you can eliminate most of the risk right away by using a large stick on a fit-for-purpose walkway. Or you can even reduce the consequences, implement safety harnesses so that if someone does unfortunately slip, they're caught and not ending up compressed in a compactor. Anything but holding onto a shitty rope and jumping up and down. So Stephen Jones, he was the managing director of this company. He was the boss and he had his own way of solving the problem. His solution was to scale the conveyor belt himself, which sloped up to 3.5 meters or 11 feet, then use the ropes to jump up and down on the waste to clear it. Now just imagine you slipped or got caught in the conveyor belt when you were climbing to clear the chute. You're fucked. On one instance, it was reported that when the managing director saw one of his employees dangerously climbing the chute, he actually waved to them, encouraging him to go on and clear it instead of telling him to get the fuck down and do it safely. On occasions, he would even scale the 11-foot conveyor belt himself to clear blockages. Talk about leading by example. So this was the norm at this recycling firm. Unsafe processes that were actively encouraged. There was only so long before something went terribly wrong. Norman, who was fresh to the job, was doing things the way he was taught to do them. In November 30th, 2017, he collected the waste cardboard in his box van and took it along the A55 to RCL, arriving at approximately 4 p.m. He climbed the 11-foot conveyor belt with no harness or safety net to catch him. Then he fell in. Norman was working alone that day, so no one was there to see him fall and raise any alarms at all. The next person on site that day was a man called Paul King. He arrived on site at 7:18 p.m, 3 whole hours after the accident had taken place. Upon entering his work, he first seen Norman's van, seen the machine, then noticed blood leaking from the hopper machine, which was still turned on. He said, quote, "I opened the side door of the chute. Mr. Butler was trapped inside. I realised he was dead." He would then immediately call an ambulance, but it was too little, too late. Norman Butler's left foot had been amputated completely, taken clean off by the hopper, which had resulted in him eventually dying from blood loss. Stephen Jones, the director, claims that he spotted Norman on the A55 but did not think that he would go to work that day. Instead, he believed that he would have simply left his van at RCL, then went home as he was told to not work alone. Something smells a bit fishy to me here. Why on earth would he leave his van at work and have to walk all the way home? So Jones is clearly already trying his best to cover up his tracks here, but he would eventually be caught out lying. Funny enough, the HSE, Health and Safety Executive, was on site the day prior to Norman Butler's death to do a spot check of the facilities. Mr. Jones told him that he was in fact the only person who could work the hopper, meaning he did not have to have paperwork regarding a risk assessment, which is essentially a safety guide on potential risks, the consequences and likelihood of them happening. Which, of course, we know is a massive lie, as other employees unblock the hopper regularly. Stephen Jones was eventually tried for manslaughter at Mold Crown Court. Jones denied the manslaughter charge by unlawfully killing Norman Butler due to gross negligence in that a managing director, he owed him a duty of care as an employee. It was revealed in court that the shop floor was chaotic and cluttered and safety was shockingly bad, said the prosecutor on the case. There wasn't even a single safety manual on site for operating the hopper anywhere. The jury would eventually find that Mr. Jones had failed to train him properly, failed to ensure staff never worked alone and didn't have a guard around the hopper into which he fell. He prioritised maximising profits over time-consuming and costly safety measures. Mr. Jones was found guilty of manslaughter in July 2022, nearly 5 years after the accident. He was jailed for 9 years, however he will only have to spend 6 years behind bars. He was also fined £120,000 for health and safety breaches. So I guess you can say this is a lesson in why health and safety at the workplace is so important. It's pretty easy to think if you're not there, you're not liable, but it comes from above.